All right, Hotep, how's everybody doing today? All right, Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. Hope everybody's doing well today. It is Wednesday, August 8th, 2018. Wednesday, August 8th, 2018. Hope everyone's doing well. Okay, so I wanted to broadcast today because this date is a very, very important date in history. And I talked about August 8th on my radio show this past Sunday, the African History Network show. And August 8th, 1974 is the day that Richard Nixon, President Richard Nixon, the 37th president of the United States, announced that he was resigning from office. And he became the first sitting U.S. president in history to resign from office, okay? And you have an article from thehill.com, from August 3rd, 2018, just a few days ago. And the name of this article is Watergate Prosecutor, quote, history is repeating itself, end quote, with Mueller probe. History is repeating itself with Mueller probe. So what I'm going to do is talk some about the history of the Watergate break-in, the Watergate investigation, and what led to Richard Nixon resigning from office this date in 1974, and deal with how history is repeating itself with Donald Trump, okay? And as I said before, as I said for about 2 years, because I've been following Trump since he first announced he was running for president back in about June of 2015. And I talked about the Russian intelligence being behind the hacking of the Democratic National Committee, as well as the Hillary Clinton campaign. I talked about that before the election. And I've been saying for 2 years, well, since he became president-elect, I said that that Trump is going to be forced to resign from office, and I still stand by that. Okay. All right. So how's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay. And let me post the information here on the thread, and we'll put this on our YouTube channel as well, Michael Imhotep on YouTube. Okay. So this is going to be a real history lesson for a lot of people. Okay. This will be a real history lesson for a lot of people. Okay. So history.com has a good article from today, August 8th, 2017. And it's entitled August 8th, 1974, Nixon Resigns. August 8th, 1974, Nixon Resigns. And history.com is the official website of the History Channel, right? So I get their emails every morning, and they deal with this date in history, okay? And they deal with different time periods in history, and they talk about, you know, what took place this day in 1792, things like this. But in an evening televised address, President Richard M. Nixon announces his intention to become the first president in American history to resign. Okay, and this was shocking news. Now, a lot of people felt that he should resign, but for this to happen, this was shocking news. Okay, so with impeachment proceedings underway against him for his involvement in the Watergate affair, Richard Nixon was finally bowing to pressure from the public and the U.S. Congress to leave the White House. Nixon said, quote unquote, by taking this action, he said in a solemn address from the Oval Office, quote, I hope that I will have hastened the start of the process of healing, which is so desperately needed in America. Okay. So, the he was not put on trial. Articles of impeachment were drawn up. First article of impeachment was obstruction of justice. Second article of impeachment was abuse of power. And there were hearings being held in the House Judiciary Committee on whether or not he should be impeached. But he was not put on trial by the U.S. Congress. That's part of the impeachment process. So impeachment starts in the House of Representatives based upon Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, dealing with high crimes and misdemeanors, okay? And that's the power given to the U.S. Congress based upon the Constitution, specifically the House of Representatives, okay? And if we look at, just very quickly, just to give some background information on this, if we look at this, and this is my copy of the U.S. Constitution and other important documents, the Declaration of Independence and other great documents of American history, 1775 to 1865, 1775 to 1865, okay? So I carry this with me wherever I go. This is edited by John Grafton, Grafton, and it's from Dover Books, D-O-V-E-R. But you can go to archives.gov, or loc.gov, which is the Library of Congress website, and you can read this. You can read this document there as well. Okay, so just quickly, if we look at Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, it says the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for F-O-R, for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, okay? Now, contrary to what this meme floating around on Facebook says, and when people posted it, I had to post the actual quote of Article 2, Section 4 from, I think it was archives.gov. I cited to shut that nonsense down. If the president is impeached, it doesn't mean all the officers are removed from office. It means that a president can be removed from office based upon Article 2, Section 4. A vice president can be removed from office based upon Article 2, Section 4. An attorney general, a deputy attorney general. Right now, you have some Republicans who've drawn up articles of impeachment against Deputy Attorney or Assistant Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, okay? And there's a small effort trying to remove him, all right? So any of them can be removed from office, but if the president is removed, doesn't mean all of them are removed. That's just a bunch of nonsense. That's a misunderstanding of the Constitution, okay? So I just want to give that historical background there, all right? So now, just before, everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page also. How's everybody doing, okay? And now I'm gonna let you know about where I'll be this weekend, because I'll be in San Diego this weekend, August 10th through the 12th, at Return of the Gods, the Real Family Reunion. So those in California area, come on out. And I need to let Flex Alexander know. I'm glad I reminded. Because Flex Alexander is one of my frat brothers. He's out in California, married to Shanice. You know, Shanice, I love your smile. I need to let Flex know I'm coming back to California, because when I was out there New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, he was tied up with family and we couldn't connect, all right? Okay, so let's go back to this here. All right. Okay, so just before noon the next day, which was August 9th, 1974, Richard Nixon officially ended his term as the 37th president of the United States, okay? So he did the address on television on August 8th, the night before. This is the anniversary of this. And then he officially resigned noon, August 9th, 1974, okay? And it was his vice president, Gerald Ford, who became president. Now, before departing with his family in a helicopter from the White House lawn, Richard Nixon smiled farewell and enigmatically raised his arms in a victory or peace salute. The helicopter door was then closed, and the Nixon family began their journey home to San Clemente, California. Minutes later, Vice President Gerald R. Ford, who's from Michigan, was sworn in as the 38th President of the United States in the East Room of the White House. After taking the oath of office, President Gerald Ford spoke to the nation in a television address declaring, quote, "My fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over," end quote. He later pardoned Richard Nixon. So about a month after this took place, he gave a full presidential pardon to Richard Nixon for any crimes he may have committed while in office, explaining that he wanted to end the national divisions created by the Watergate scandal. Okay, so we're going to get to some of the history of what led to this taking place on this date in 1974, 44 years ago. What were the set of circumstances, right, that led to this taking place? This was unprecedented. This was the first time in U.S. history that a sitting U.S. president resigned from office. If we look at the article from thehill.com from August 3rd, 2018, entitled "Watergate Prosecutor, History is Repeating Itself with Mueller Probe." Watergate Prosecutor, History is Repeating Itself with Mueller Probe. Now, if you listen to my radio show, the African History Network show, which you should, and you see me broadcast here on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, follow us here on Facebook, okay? Because we have a ton of information here for you. And we have videos archived here, hundreds of videos. They're also on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep on YouTube, but you can listen to the audio podcast of my radio show. You can listen at work, you can listen on the go. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have almost 900 audio podcasts there. And we're on 6 different podcast platforms. We may be back on Stitcher now because I contacted Stitcher, I think week before last, or last week, early last week, to get our shows back on Stitcher. So we're on blogtalkradio.com, we're on iTunes, we're on Castbox, FM Player, TuneIn.com, Acast. And if we're not on Stitcher right now, we'll be back on Stitcher in the next couple of days, Stitcher.com. Just search for the African History Network show on any of those platforms, the African History Network show, and our podcasts are there, okay? All right, so former Watergate prosecutor Nick Ackerman, who you see on MSNBC a lot, okay? He was an assistant Watergate prosecutor. He's still an attorney. He still practices law. And Nick Ackerman has been right on the money. He was just on MSNBC today. I really like him. You hear me play some excerpts of interviews with him on our radio show, the African History Network show. And Nick Ackerman knows more about Watergate than most people because he was there. He was an assistant Watergate prosecutor. And he understands what's going on here with Donald Trump and Trump's cronies more than anybody else as well, okay? So former Watergate prosecutor Nick Ackerman said on Friday, last Friday, which was August 3rd, said on Friday that special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation is, quote, history repeating itself, quote, history repeating itself, and suggested that some administration members questioning Robert Mueller's probe could be charged with perjury. Oh, I guarantee you some of them are going to be charged with perjury. And Donald Trump Jr. is probably one of them. Donald Trump Jr. is probably one of them. And Trump is scared to death, okay? Trump is scared to death of this. Nick Ackerman said, quote, "You've got a dynamic here that's different than any other criminal investigation. It's the same thing that happened with the Watergate investigation." Now, this is an assistant Watergate prosecutor who was there, and he's telling you, he's a analyst for MSNBC. He's telling you, quote, "You've got a dynamic here that's different than any other criminal investigation. It's the same thing that happened with the Watergate investigation, but you got more than 10 times as much evidence here than you had in Watergate. This is much, much deeper, much worse than Watergate." He said that the political figures who tell the truth in interviews with prosecutors could see their careers end. And for those who plead the Fifth Amendment, quote, "it's as good as saying you're guilty," end quote. And see, Trump is going to be forced to resign from office because there's no way in the hell that Trump wants to be put on trial by the U.S. Senate and testify under oath by the U.S. Senate, in the U.S. Senate. There's no way in hell he wants to go through that. If he pleads the fifth, is implying that he's guilty. If you actually understand Trump in the first place, you will know Trump never wanted to be president. He wanted to run for president, and he wanted to launch Trump TV. That was the whole angle. He wanted to launch a media outlet, Trump TV, okay? If you research it, you'll find out that the night of the election, November 8th, 2016, Donald Trump did not have an acceptance speech written. He only had a concession speech written because he did not think he was going to win. Melania didn't think he was going to win. When he won, Melania broke out crying because they knew that their whole life would change. The goal was not for him to become president, okay? He became president by accident. His Russian involvement, WikiLeaks, Vladimir Putin, all that. And don't take my word for this. New York Times, I dealt with this on my radio show on July 22nd. I did this show. It ended up being the entire show. We dealt with Donald Trump is a traitor. Here's the evidence. Donald Trump is a traitor. Here's the evidence. And read this article from New York Times, July 18th, 2018, because this was a huge article. New York Times broke this story. All the news outlets reported on this. This was a huge story 2 weeks ago. From the start, Trump has muddied a clear message. Putin interfered. From the start, Trump has muddied a clear message. Putin interfered. Okay. I'm going to post the link of this article here on the thread of the broadcast. I'm going to share the first two paragraphs with you because most people don't know this information. All right. And then we'll jump back. But this ties right into right into Watergate, because this is much worse than Watergate. This is conspiracy with a foreign power to influence a presidential election and other stuff. You're going to find out about money laundering and other things going on also. Okay. So let's post the link of the article here on thread of the broadcast. So this is from New York Times. Okay. This is from the New York Times, and this is from July 18th, 2018. Okay. All right. Let me just share the first two. Paragraphs with you, or three paragraphs. 2 weeks before his inauguration was January 20th, 2016, right? We all remember 2017, following year, January 20th, 2017. We all remember that solemn day. 2 weeks before his inauguration, Donald J. Trump was shown highly classified intelligence. Highly classified intelligence. And let's close this out here. He was shown highly classified intelligence indicating that President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia had personally ordered complex cyber attacks to sway the 2016 American election. He was shown overwhelming evidence on January 6, 2017, 2 weeks before the inauguration. He was shown overwhelming evidence by the heads of the intelligence agencies. The evidence included text messages and emails from Russian military officers and information gleaned or gathered from a top secret source close to Vladimir Putin, who had described to the CIA how the Kremlin decided to execute its campaign of hacking and disinformation. Okay? Who had described to the CIA how the Kremlin decided to execute its campaign of hacking and disinformation. Donald Trump sounded grudgingly convinced, according to several people who attended the intelligence briefing. But ever since, Donald Trump has tried to cloud the very clear findings that he received on January 6, 2017, which his own intelligence leaders have unanimously endorsed. The shifting narrative underscores the degree to which Trump regularly picks and chooses intelligence to suit his political purposes. That has never been more clear than this week. On Monday, standing next to Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, Finland, Trump said he accepted Putin's denial of Russian election intrusions. By Tuesday, faced with a bipartisan political outcry, Trump sought to walk back his words and sided with his intelligence agencies. Okay, so you read the rest of this. But here's the thing. So who was giving him the briefing? FBI director at the time, James Comey, director of the CIA, John Brennan, director of national intelligence at the time, James Clapper Jr. Okay, these were the people giving him the briefing. James Clapper came out, when this article came out, he came out to corroborate that this meeting took place and that they briefed Trump on this information. Trump has been playing dumb, and Trump has been lying ever since he took the oath of office. This article right here, go back and read this, because this was a huge article that exposed all of this stuff. This is much worse than Watergate. Okay, so I want to give you that background information, because I researched this type of stuff. I understand everybody doesn't have a type of time to keep up with this. You tune into the African History Network. We provide this information for you here. Okay. All right. So let's get back to this. And if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network as well. PayPal.me/the 8HN show. PayPal.me/the 8HN show. All right. That helps us to keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay the bills, etc. Okay. Or you can go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And then also I teach online classes. They're all on demand. We have a bundle pack right now. You get all 10. You get 10 of my online courses on sale for $60, regularly $130. It's all on demand. Watch them around the world. And that includes Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We just posted the link there. And it's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. All right. So let's go back to this article here from August 3rd, Friday, August 3rd, 2018, from TheHill.com. TheHill.com. The Hill is they deal with political news, politics. It's a fantastic news source. TheHill.com. Watergate Prosecutor, quote, history is repeating itself with Mueller probe. Okay. So, and they're quoting Nick Ackerman, who was on MSNBC. I think it was Friday, August 3rd. He was on MSNBC. Nick Ackerman said, you've got people who are very politically high up in the government to go in and tell the truth, tell them exactly what happened. You're gone. That's the end of your career, he said. Okay. And before that, he said that you've got a dynamic here that's different than any other criminal investigation. It's the same thing that happened with the Watergate investigation, quote unquote. Now, he said that the political figures who tell the truth in interviews with prosecutors could see their careers end. And for those who plead the Fifth Amendment, quote unquote, it's as good as saying you're guilty. Okay. He said, quote, you've got people who are very politically high up in the government to go in and tell the truth, tell them exactly what happened. You're gone. That's the end of your career, end quote. Okay. He went on to say, if you go in and you lie, that's what they did in the Watergate hearings. And all those people got convicted of perjury, as well as all the other crimes they were charged with. It's important to note, Richard Nixon got a presidential pardon. He didn't do 1 day in prison. 48 people around Richard Nixon went to prison. Nixon got a presidential pardon, didn't do 1 day in prison. 48 people around Richard Nixon went to prison. Nick Ackerman went on to say, quote, you see that with Donald Trump Jr. going in and talking about the Trump Tower meeting, okay, the Trump Tower meeting that took place June 9th, okay, because at first, keep in mind, before the New York Times released the email correspondence between Donald Trump Jr. and the Russians. Donald Trump Jr. for weeks said the meeting did not take place. The New York Times contacted him and they said, we have the emails, we're about to release the emails. That's when he came out with the emails, okay? Because their article came out, he released the emails like about an hour, 2 hours before that article came out. But they contacted him and said, we have the email correspondence between you and the Russians about this Trump Tower meeting, and we're going to release them. So then he comes out and releases the emails, okay, talking about a meeting that he said never took place. Then he goes on Sean Hannity's show and say, hey, I want to be transparent. I'm releasing the emails, blah, blah, blah. This is everything. Then we find out about all these other people in the meeting that he did not say were in the meeting. We find out that campaign manager Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner, they were in this meeting. They said the meeting was about Russian adoption. No, it was actually about removing the Magnitsky Act, which deals with sanctions, and that deals with Russian adoption, but that deals with lifting sanctions on Russia. This stuff is deep. Donald Trump Jr. is in jeopardy, and if you look at the past few days and Trump tweeting like crazy, the reports came out from Washington Post that Donald Trump is scared he's scared that his son may have stupidly, inadvertently committed a crime. Okay, I don't think it was stupid and inadvertent. The other thing is the FBI warned the Trump campaign prior to this meeting that the Russians will probably contact you. If they contact you, let the FBI know. They did not let the FBI know before this meeting, and they did not let the FBI know after this meeting. Read the article from NBCnews.com, because see, I have hundreds of articles dealing with this. Read the article from NBCnews.com from August 6, 2018. The White House's story on the Trump Tower meeting shifts yet again. The White House's story on the Trump Tower meeting shifts yet again. This stuff is deep, and they keep getting caught in lie after lie after lie, and they keep having to change the lie. Okay? This is, I mean, I've never seen anything. I've never read anything like this before. This is crazy. Okay, and we just posted a link. Once again, name of the article from NBCnews.com from August 6th. That's from Monday, from August 6, 2018. The White House's story on the Trump Tower meeting shifts yet again. Okay, so check that out, and then. And then this article from the WashingtonPost.com. Trump acknowledges, defends 2016 meeting between son, Kremlin-aligned lawyer. All right. And what you notice now is a shift coming from his defense, Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani, who I call Rudy Giuliani. See, before they were saying collusion is not a crime. Now they're saying even if there was a collusion, it's not a crime. See, before they were saying, before they were saying there was no collusion and collusion is not a crime, but they were saying no collusion. Now they're saying even if there was collusion, collusion is not a crime. But conspiracy is. Conspiracy to commit a crime is a crime. Okay, that's part of collusion. Conspiracy to commit a crime is a crime. Okay, let's continue here. So, Nick Ackerman said, quote, you see that with Donald Trump Jr. going in and talking about the Trump Tower meeting. You see it with Jared Kushner going in and talking about various meetings. It's history repeating itself all over again. Okay. Now, this is just so people understand, this is not just a political commentator. This is Nick Ackerman, who was an assistant Watergate prosecutor. He was there. He saw what took place. So when he says this is history repeating itself, he knows what took place. Okay? He said, quote, if you go in and you lie, that's what they did in the Watergate hearings. And all those people got convicted of perjury. as well as all the other crimes they were charged with, end quote. He went on to say, quote, you see that with Donald Trump Jr. going in and talking about the Trump Tower meeting. He testified before Congress, Donald Trump Jr. You see it with Jared Kushner going in and talking about various meetings. It's history repeating itself all over again, he said, quote unquote. Now, Jared Kushner and Trump Jr. have not been interviewed by Robert Mueller's team, his investigation, but both have spoken to congressional committees investigating issues surrounding Russia's attempted interference in the 2016 election. And lying to Congress is a felony. That's a crime, whether you're under oath or not. In these congressional hearings, when you testify in front of Congress, lying to Congress is a crime, whether you are under oath or not under oath. Now, attorney Nick Ackerman's, a former assistant Watergate prosecutor, Nick Ackerman's comments come after the New York Times reported that Donald Trump wants to interview with Mueller in his probe, believing he can clear his name of any allegations against him. Trump's lawyers have warned him against sitting down with Mueller. And you see a new development today. Basically, it looks like they're saying that he's not going to sit down. They don't want, see, Trump can talk all this stuff he wants to. None of his attorneys want him to sit down with Mueller. They know Trump will lie. They know Trump will lie. And it's not a perjury trap. Because if all you do is tell the truth, then it's not a trap. They know Trump is going to lie, and he's going to get himself in the world. He's going to get himself in even deeper trouble. So the special counsel has reportedly offered to place some limits on a possible interview with Trump, including allowing Trump to submit some of his answers in writing. But it seems like that's off the table now. It seems like that's off the table now. Okay. So check out this article here. This is from thehill.com. Watergate Prosecutor, history is repeating itself with Mueller probe. Okay. This is from August 3rd, 2018. All right. And if we just look at this, okay, let's post this link here. Okay, that's from thehill.com. And if you check out WashingtonPost.com, New York Times, from the day, you'll probably see an update. I'm scanning for update right now to post it. We'll look at the Washington Post or NewYorkTimes.com. I was just on New York Times website. Sanctions, we may get a lawyer. Okay. But check that out. Okay, so let's continue here. Because you'll see some updates on what his team said today. Okay. All right, so let's look at the history of the Watergate scandal, what took place, what led up to 44 years ago today, August 8th, 1974, Richard Nixon resigning from office, okay? And I'm trying to see if I have it. Okay. I don't see it here. All right, so let's look at this article from history.com, official website of the History Channel. This is entitled Watergate Scandal, Watergate Scandal. History.com, they have a lot of good articles here. I do a lot of research at history.com. Okay, so the Watergate scandal began early in the morning of June 17th, 1972. So this past June, I talked about the anniversary of the Watergate Break In. I talked about it on my radio show. June 17th, 1972. Now, what's interesting is that is exactly 1 year after Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs, which is June 17th, 1971. Because the war on drugs, contrary to popular belief, contrary to what Pastor Darrell Scott said when Roland Martin interviewed him on the Tom Jordan Morning Show on Monday morning, August 6, 2018. And Pastor Darrell Scott was one of those preachers who met with Donald Trump on criminal justice reform. I still don't know what the outcome of the meeting was. I still don't know what policy changes took place or anything like that. But this Negro said that Donald Trump is the most pro-black president of his lifetime. He's just, you know, just crazy. All right. And we posted that interview on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. It's at blackamericaweb.com, and it's also blackamericaweb.com, and it's also on Roland Martin's YouTube channel, Roland Martin on YouTube. And in that interview, Roland gave Pastor Darrell Scott a real history lesson, because see, Pastor Darrell Scott, see, a lot of people want to start the war on drugs September 13th, 1994, when Bill Clinton signed the Omnibus Crime Bill, which was written largely by Joe Biden, Senator Joe Biden. Joe Biden worked on that crime bill. Senator Joe Biden worked on that crime bill for 6 years. Clinton signed it into law his second year in office. Okay. But what people don't understand, so what Pastor Darrell Scott tried to do is blame it on the Democrats. He did not talk about the war on drugs that was declared June 17, 1971 by Republican President Richard Nixon, which led to Ronald Reagan's war on drugs in 1982, which led to the Omnibus Crime Bill, September 13th, 1994. He didn't deal with any of that history, okay? And before you talk about the crime bill in 94, you have to talk about Nixon's war on drugs, okay? And you have to talk about John Ehrlichman, his domestic policy advisor. I've done an entire lecture called how Richard Nixon's war on drugs was a war on the African-American community. So I've done the research, okay? That's also one of the online classes that we have on demand that I teach at our online school, the African History Network School, okay? So you can check out our online classes at africanhistorynetwork.com. They're all on demand. And we have them in the bundle pack right now. You get 10 of them on sale, $60, regularly $130. And that includes Richard Nixon's war on drugs. It includes African-American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, photo suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. And it also includes understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, okay? So we have to understand this chronology of history. All right, so the Watergate scandal began early in the morning of June 17th, 1972, when several burglars were arrested in the office of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, located in the Watergate complex of buildings in Washington, D.C. So it was hotels and apartment buildings. This was no ordinary robbery. The prowlers were connected to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, okay? And his re-election campaign, the initials were CREEP, C-R-E-E-P. Okay, committee to re-elect the president of the United States. Okay, CREEP. That's what it was called. CREEP, C-R-E-E-P. Imagine that. Okay, so the prowlers were connected to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, and they had been caught wiretapping phones and stealing documents. They wiretapped phones in the Democratic National Committee, and they stole documents. Richard Nixon took aggressive steps to cover up the crime afterwards. And in August of 1974, after his role in the conspiracy, the C-O-N-spiracy, his role in the conspiracy was revealed, Nixon resigned. See, it wasn't the crime that was the big problem. It was the cover-up that led to Nixon resigning. It was obstruction of justice. It was the cover-up that led to Nixon announcing his resignation 44 years ago today, August 8th, 1974. This is what people have to understand, okay? It was obstruction of justice. Richard Nixon tried to use the CIA to get the FBI to back off of the Watergate investigation. And once the prosecution got the Nixon tapes, it was all over after that. Once they got the Nixon tapes, it was all over after that. So here you have Michael Cohen, and you have Mueller's investigation. They have over 100 tapes that Cohen has recorded. Now, we know on some of them, Trump is on them. We don't know how many Trump is on. We know at least one of them they're discussing setting up a shell company, an LLC, to pay hush money to the Playboy playmate McCullough. Okay, so just as it was the Nixon tapes that brought down Nixon, Lordy, there are tapes. Hashtag Lordy, there are tapes. Oh, the coin tapes are going to, I think, is going to lead to Trump resigning. And it was attorney Michael Avenatti, who is Stormy Daniels' attorney. He said a few months ago that it was the Stormy Daniels story in that investigation that led to Michael Cohen. This leads to Michael Cohen's tapes. And Michael Avenatti said that the Stormy Daniels and the basically leading to Michael Cohen, all that stuff, he said that's going to be the end of the Trump presidency. Okay, so Nixon took aggressive steps to cover up the crime afterwards, and in August of 1974, after his role in the conspiracy was revealed, Nixon resigned. The Watergate scandal changed American politics forever, leading many Americans to question their leaders and think more critically about the presidency. All right. So we'll come to some of your comments here in just a second. Well, let's look at some of your comments in a second. Then we're going to continue with some of the history of the Watergate break-in. All right. So we have who we have here. We have Renee. Renee said his tweets will be his demise. And oh, absolutely, his tweets will be his demise. All right. And we just saw Trump admitted Trump just admitted in the past few days that the meeting that took place June 9th, 2016 was to gain dirt on Hillary Clinton, which is what his administration had denied previously. He admitted it. And we know that in the past 2 or 3 weeks, it has come out that Mueller is looking and analyzing Trump's tweets, which are official statements from the White House. These are official statements from the White House. He is investigating those tweets for possible obstruction of justice. Okay. Oh yeah, he's gonna find them. I guarantee you. Oh yeah, he's gonna find them. Okay. I'm saying this is the dumbest man I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God. I've never seen anybody who thinks he's so smart and is so dumb at the same time. I've studied history. I've never seen anything like this before. I've never even read anything like this before. This is just ridiculous. NBCnews.com, NBC reported a few days ago, Trump says son's Trump Tower meeting with Russians meant to get information on Clinton. This is what Trump tweeted. Quote, this was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal and done all the time in politics, and it went nowhere. No, that's illegal. It's illegal to get information from a foreign adversary to influence an election. That's illegal. Not only that, the FBI warned the Trump campaign that Russia probably will try to contact you. If they do, let us know. They didn't do that. Let me post this article here because this is what Trump tweeted. Okay. You know, all you have to do is follow the breadcrumbs. I mean, this is the dumbest criminal I've ever seen in my life. It's almost as if he wants to get caught. You know, it's almost because, like, you keep in mind, Trump, I keep telling people, Trump never wanted to be president. He wanted to run. He wanted to win the primary. Trump's goal was never to become president, and he didn't think he was going to win. It's almost as if Trump wants to get caught. This is from August 5th, 2018. This is from Sunday, August 5th, 2018. Trump says son's Trump Tower meeting with Russians meant to, quote unquote, get information on Clinton. This is an admission right here. Donald Trump said Sunday that the meeting between his son, Donald Trump Jr., and a Russian lawyer in June of 2016, that was the meeting, June 9th, 2016, was, quote unquote, to get information on an opponent, end quote, seemingly contradicting a statement from more than a year ago that the meeting focused on a Russian adoption program. Quote, fake news reporting, a complete fabrication, that I am concerned about the meeting my wonderful son Donald had in Trump Tower, end quote. History, this dude going down. I'm sorry. This dude right here, oh, and even if he gets a presidential pardon, crimes that he may have committed in, say, the state of New York, say in the Southern District of New York, right? The Southern District of the Prosecutor's Office, U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District. A presidential pardon does not protect you from state prosecution. People just have to keep this in mind. A presidential pardon does not protect you from state prosecution. You can still be brought up on charges by the state's attorney general. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's look at the Watergate break-in and the origins of it. So, and I was looking at some of your questions. Okay, Willie Clarence, okay. And African-American business owners, post the name of your business here as well. You can advertise with the African History Network also on the audio podcast of our radio shows, our Sunday night show. We reach thousands of people. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. I think we have 2 advertising slots left. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We have a special promotion, buy 1 month, get 1 month free. Okay. And then also those in San Diego. Hey, I'll be in San Diego Friday, August 10th through Sunday, August 12th. Return the Guys, the Real Family Reunion. Live hip hop performances. Professor Kaba Kamene will be there. We'll have presentations. We'll celebrate the shift and rise to enlightenment. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com for more information. Soleil will be there as well. Professor Griff's wife, Soleil. I remember her on JT Money's song, Who Dat. Motivational speakers, live African dancers, martial arts demonstration, yoga, award ceremony. Queen Afua is being honored this year. I'm being honored. Professor Kaba Kamene as well, Booker T. Coleman, one of my teachers. We have the information as a 3-day pass, discounted at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, all right? Okay, so we have Renee, we got Willie. How's everybody doing? Renee Lamar. All right, so the origins of the Watergate break-in lay in the hostile political climate of the time. By 1972, when Republican President Richard Nixon was running for re-election, the United States was embroiled in the Vietnam War and the country was deeply divided. A forceful presidential campaign therefore seemed essential to the president and some of his key advisors, okay? Because Nixon was re-elected. So we know Nixon became president-elect in November of 1968. And he ran on the platform of law and order, which basically means protect white people and lock up African Americans, okay? And he was a backlash to the Black Power movement, the Civil Rights movement. He was a backlash to affirmative action. He was a backlash to all the rebellions that were taking place across the country. Okay, in 1967, the summer of 1967 was known as the Long Hot Summer. We know in the year 1967 there were 159 violent uprisings all across the country. Okay, rebellions. We had the Detroit Rebellion there. You have different Newark, New Jersey, things like this. Okay. And he was a backlash to all of this. And he ran on a platform of law and order, which means to protect white people and lock up African Americans. And that's part of the same platform that Donald Trump ran on as well, because Trump was a backlash to 2 terms of President Barack Obama, the first African American president. He was a backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement, to holding police officers accountable. He was a backlash to the rebellions, Ferguson, Missouri, Freddie Gray, all these things, okay, Philando Castile, all this. It was a backlash to all of this. Okay, so Their aggressive tactics, a forceful presidential campaign, therefore seemed essential to the president and some of his key advisors. Their aggressive tactics included what turned out to be illegal espionage. In May of 1972, as evidence would later show, members of Richard Nixon's committee to re-elect the president, known derisively as CREEP, C-R-E-E-P, the acronym CREEP, okay, a committee to re-elect the president. They broke into the Democratic National Committee's Watergate headquarters, stole copies of top secret documents, and bugged the office's phones, okay? Now, it's going to be the Washington Post reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. They deserve a great deal of the credit for uncovering the details of the Watergate scandal. Their reporting won them a Pulitzer Prize and was the basis for the best-selling book, All the President's Men, which later became a movie. And much of their information came from an anonymous whistleblower called Deep Throat, who in 2005 was revealed to be W. Mark Felt, F-E-L-T, a former associate director of the FBI, okay? Omarosa has a book coming out. It was just revealed today. Omarosa has at least one recording of Donald Trump. We don't know how many recordings she has. It was tapes that brought down Nixon. Probably be tapes that bring down Trump as well, at least partly. Now, the wiretaps failed to work properly, okay? The wiretaps that the burglars installed on the phones of the Democratic National Committee failed to work properly. However, so on June 17th, 1972, a group of 5 men returned to the Watergate building, okay? There were 2 break-ins, 2 Watergate break-ins, all right? The one that most people know about was June 17th, 1972. That's when they got caught. As the prowlers were preparing to break into the office with a new microphone, a security guard noticed someone had taped over several of the building's door locks, okay? That security guard's name was Frank Wheels. They don't mention his name in this article, okay? But his name was Frank Wheels, and he was African-American. Frank Wheels was the hero, but he's largely forgotten when it comes to Watergate, okay, the Watergate break-in. He's the one who discovered the Watergate break-in. He's the one who called the police. Frank Wheels died at age 52, okay? He didn't get the accolades, he didn't get the radio shows, he didn't get the book deals like some of the criminals in Watergate got. Read New York Times article, September 29th, 2000, by Adam Clymer, C-L-Y-M-E-R. Frank Wheels, 52, Watchmen foiled Watergate break-in, okay? He died at 52 years old. Frank Wheels, the night watchman who discovered the 1972 Watergate burglary, which ultimately led to President Richard Nixon's resignation, died on Wednesday, okay? He was only 52 years old when he died, all right? He was 24 years old, according to the article. He was a 24-year-old security guard who discovered the Watergate break-in. But when they talk about Watergate, even when I see them talk about it on MSNBC and Nick Ackerman and Jill Wine-Banks, who was another prosecutor in Watergate, they never mention Frank Wheels. Even in the article, as much as I like history.com, in their articles, they don't even mention him by name. They just say a security guard. No, he had a name. His name was Frank Wheels, W-I-L-L-S. He was 52 years old and lived in North Augusta, South Carolina. Mr. Wheels, who struggled with celebrity and joblessness after being hailed as a hero, died at University Hospital in Augusta, Georgia. Friends told the Augusta Chronicle that he had suffered from a brain tumor. Frank Wheels was a 24-year-old security guard at the Watergate office building in Washington, D.C. He was working the midnight shift on June 17, 1972. He discovered masking tape, scotch tape, over a lock on a basement door, and thinking some worker had left it to make it easier to get in and out, he removed the tape. On another inspection round, he's going making his rounds, doing inspection. On another inspection round, he found the lock taped over again. He goes, he removes the tape at first, he goes make his rounds, he comes back, and the tape is back on the door. So he calls the police. Just like Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner and everybody else in the Donald Trump campaign should have called the FBI when the Russians contacted them and said, we have dirt on Hillary Clinton. They didn't do that. He did the right thing. He called the police. So they locked it. So on another inspection round, he found the lock taped over again and called the police. They locked the doors, turned off the elevators, and started checking darkened offices. About 2 a.m. at the 6th floor headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, they found 5 men: Bernard L. Baker, Virgilio Gonzalez, Eugenio Martinez, James W. McCord Jr., and Frank Sturgis. As Mr. Frank Wills put it in a 1997 interview with the Florida Times Union, he said, quote, when we turned the lights on, one person, then 2 persons, then 3 persons came out and on down the line, end quote. The 5 men were arrested for what Ronald L. Ziegler, Richard Nixon's press secretary, tried to dismiss as, quote unquote, a third-rate burglary, end quote. The White House saw to their being paid hush money. Sound like bribery to me. The White House saw to these men being paid hush money, but after the men were convicted before Judge John J. Sircia, S-I-R-C-I-A, the next January, Mr. McCord began talking to prosecutors and told them that Richard Nixon's campaign committee, CREEP, the Committee for the Re-election of the President, had been behind the burglary. Mr. McCord told the prosecutors that Richard Nixon's campaign committee, the Committee for the Re-election for the President, had been behind the Watergate burglary. When White House tapes made it clear, tapes, Lordy, there are tapes. When White House tapes made it clear that Richard Nixon had played a central role in the cover-up effort, and he was faced with impeachment and conviction, he resigned officially August 9th, 1974, 12 noon. That's when he actually left office. He did the television address the night before, August 8th, 1974. This is the 44th anniversary of this criminal Richard Nixon resigning from office, and history is repeating itself. Frank Wills quit his job soon after the burglary was discovered, believing that he did not get the raise and pay that he deserved. As the cover-up was unraveling in 1974, Frank Wills made a little money talking about his historic moment, but his appearances cost him jobs because he was away from work. Most of the jobs paid not much more than minimum wage, although he did better than that when he played himself in the 1976 movie about Richard Nixon's downfall called All the President's Men. And that was based upon the book, okay, that we just talked about. Frank Wills was convicted of shoplifting in 1983. Frank Wills was convicted of shoplifting in 1983. For some years, he worked for comedian Dick Gregory, who actually were honoring Dick Gregory at the Return of the Gods, August 10th through the 12th, San Diego, California. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I'll be there in San Diego. I'm an honoree this year also. Okay, so check that out. Shout out to everybody involved with Return of the Gods, Sister Kateria and Sister Herb Alchemist Brittany. Okay, so he worked for comedian Dick Gregory, who was promoting a diet product and lived in the Bahamas. He moved back to North Augusta in 1990 to take care of his mother, who died in 1992. Frank Wills was survived by his daughter, Angel Brown of Ackerman, South Carolina. Interviewed by the Washington Star News on the day that Richard Nixon resigned, Mr. Frank Wills said, quote, "We treat the president like a king when he should be a man for all the people," end quote. He complained that in Nixon's resignation speech the night before, the president failed to describe his role in the cover-up. Quote, "I think he should have been a little more specific," Frank Wills said. The Democratic National Committee gave Frank Wills an award that fall, and Robert S. Strauss, its chairman, said he had played, quote, "a unique role in the history of the nation," end quote. But the most eloquent description of his role came when Representative James Mann of South Carolina, a Democrat, casting a difficult vote for impeachment on the House Judiciary Committee, said on July 29, 1974, quote, "If there is no accountability, another president will feel free to do as he chooses. But the next time, there may be no watchman in the night." Quote, "If there is no accountability, another president will feel free to do as he chooses. But the next time, there may be no watchman in the night." So we owe a debt of gratitude to this African-American man named Frank Wills, whose name often, most of the time, does not even come up in these discussions, okay? So check out this article from New York Times, September 29, 2000. Frank Wills, 52, watchman foiled Watergate break-in. This came out when he passed away. All right, he's 52 years old, passed away of a brain tumor back in 2000. All right, so it's important to deal. So I deal with that history to include, to spend some time and include Frank Wills in this story, because if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be talking about this. And he's largely left out of history. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to the article from history.com, official website of the History Channel. Watergate scandal, Watergate scandal. And let's look at the Watergate break-in. Okay, so the wiretaps failed to properly work. Right, the first wiretaps. However, so on June 17, 1972, a group of 5 men returned to the Watergate building. As the prowlers were preparing to break into the office with a new microphone, a security guard noticed someone had taped over several of the building's door locks. The guard called the police, who arrived just in time to catch the spies red-handed. They don't even mention his goddamn name. His name was Frank Wills. It was not immediately clear that the burglars were connected to the president, okay? And as far as I can see, just to be fair, they don't mention the names of, at least here in this part, they don't mention the names of the 5 burglars also. We mentioned both of them, okay? The article from the New York Times mentions both of them. It was not immediately clear that the burglars were connected to the president. Those suspicions were raised when detectives found copies of the re-election committee's White House phone number among the burglars' belongings, okay? Those suspicions were raised when detectives found copies of the re-elections committee's White House phone number among the burglars' belongings, okay? So just a quick side note here, right? When the press secretary, who was it? The press secretary for Nixon, I think it was the press secretary, said that it was a third-rate burglary, okay? Ronald L. Ziegler, who was Nixon's press secretary, tried to dismiss the Watergate break-in and called it, quote, a quote-unquote third-rate burglary, right? That's the equivalent of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's the White House press secretary, saying that George Papadopoulos was low level. He was a coffee boy. He didn't do much in the campaign. Paul Manafort was there for only a very short period of time. He was campaign manager for 5 months, working for free. He owed millions of dollars to, he owed about $10 million to a Russian oligarch, but he's working as campaign manager for the Trump campaign for free. And he's on trial right now. This whole thing is much worse than Watergate. Okay, so as the prowlers were preparing to break into the office with the new microphone, a security guard noticed someone had taped over several of the building's door locks. The guard called the police, who arrived just in time to catch the spies red-handed. It was not immediately clear that the burglars were connected to the president. Those suspicions were raised when detectives found copies of the re-election committee's White House phone number among the burglars' belongings. Now, in August of 1974, Nixon gave a speech in which he swore that, August of 1972. Nixon gave a speech in which he swore that his White House staff was not involved in the break-in. He swore his White House staff, was not involved in the break-in, okay? Most voters believed him, and in November of 1972, Nixon was reelected in a landslide victory, okay? So let's look at Nixon's obstruction of justice, okay? And before we do that, let's just get a couple of your comments in here. So we got Willie, Frank Wills, rest in peace. We got Denise. I certainly wish DirecTV would get the African channel. Now, which African channel are you referring to, Denise? Robbie Smith said, "No watchman in the night that's deep." Robbie Smith said, that's what is going on with us. We put too many faulty, fraudulent people who have not proven themselves up on pedestals because of a title. Denise said, good information. Dennis said, but he wasn't rewarded for his reporting. Yeah, he wasn't really rewarded, no. Very, very little reward. Let's see, okay. Robert, all right. Marcella, he wanted to become president to show off he's a big businessman. If he didn't want to be president, he wouldn't run at all. He could drop off the election. Are you referring to Donald Trump, Marcella? Are you referring to Donald Trump, Marcella? Dennis, he also said he knew nothing about the meeting. Okay. All right, and if you like this type of information, you like dealing with history, be sure to register for the online courses that I teach. They're all on demand. Watch at your own pace. Watch from around the world. We have a bundle pack, make it affordable for you. We have 10 online courses that I teach, online classes. And the bundle pack on sale $60, regularly $130. It includes how Richard Nixon's war on drugs was a war on the African American community. It includes understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, African American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences, great African women in history, the mothers of civilization, and some other ones as well. So we posted the link here. Also, you can go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com is right on the homepage. It's regularly $130 on sale $60. You can buy them individually also, but the bundle pack is the best deal. They're all on demand. Watch at your own pace. Watch from around the world, your smartphone, tablet, or computer, okay? All right, and that helps support the African History Network as well. You can also donate to the African History Network if you like this type of information. You want to support what we do. Also helps me when I travel, when I go to different events and travel, when you see me broadcast on the road, things like that. It helps me get around as well. PayPal.me, PayPal.me/the AHN show. And if you decide you want to set it up for a recurring donation, you could do that as well. We definitely appreciate that. Okay, let's continue here. All right. So let's look at Richard Nixon's obstruction of justice. So it later came to light that Richard Nixon was not being truthful. Imagine that. A few days after the Watergate break-in, for instance, he arranged to provide hundreds of thousands of dollars in quote-unquote hush money to the burglars. He arranged to provide hush money to the burglars. And then you have Trump arranging, at least apparently in one tape, allegedly arranging to provide hush money to a Playboy Playmate McCullough, who alleged she had a 10-month affair with him. History is repeating itself. So then Richard Nixon and his aides hatched a plan to instruct the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, to impede the FBI's investigation of the crime. That's obstruction of justice. Nixon tried to get the CIA to get the FBI to back off of the Watergate investigation. Okay? This was a more serious crime than the break-in. It wasn't the break-in that was the big problem. It was the cover-up. It was the obstruction of justice. It was the conspiracy. Okay? This was a more serious crime than the break-in. It was an abuse of presidential power and a deliberate obstruction of justice. It was an abuse of presidential power and a deliberate obstruction of justice. May 9th, 2017, FBI Director James Comey is fired by Donald Trump. And Comey said that Trump had, there was a meeting that took place earlier that year, and Trump asked everybody to leave the room, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who was FBI Director James Comey's boss. Jared Kushner was at the meeting, asked everybody to leave the room. Sessions was reluctant to leave the room because he knew something wrong was about to happen. And Comey says that, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but basically Trump asked him, I hope you can see your way to, back off of the investigation into Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who was his national security advisor. And it was Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates that let the White House counsel Don McGahn know that this guy, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who's Trump's national security advisor, is vulnerable to being blackmailed. Because see, they had the basically the transcripts of him communicating with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak. And they were saying this guy is vulnerable to being blackmailed. She gets fired. She gets fired. And you see Sally Yates fired. You see FBI Director James Comey fired. And then you see U.S. Attorney to the Southern District of New York, whose district was Manhattan. His name was Preet Bharara. And Trump Tower is in his district, which is Manhattan. He gets fired as U.S. Attorney after Trump asked him to stay on November 30th, 2016. He was asked to come to Trump Tower November 30th, 2016. So Trump is president-elect at that time because the election was November 8th. He's asked to stay on as a U.S. attorney. All of a sudden, there were about 45 remaining U.S. attorneys. He was one of them. All of a sudden, one day, out of the clear blue, Trump says he's firing all the rest of the U.S. attorneys, including Preet Bharara, who Trump had met with previously face-to-face and asked him to stay on. So Preet Bharara is basically saying, well, this doesn't apply to me. We had a private meeting. He asked me to stay on. Trump is like, no, it applies to him also. Well, earlier that same week, there were articles written about this. You had watchdog groups that sent a letter to Preet Bharara, and they were asking Preet Bharara to investigate possible, I think it was violations of the Emolument Clause, Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution, that Trump may have committed. There were news articles written about this, okay? Let's pull up this article, npr.org. Okay, let's pull up this article. So that was earlier in the same week. Ethics watchdogs want U.S. attorney to investigate Trump's business interests. Ethics watchdogs want U.S. attorney to investigate Trump's business interests, right? And I saw, before he was fired later that week, I saw articles about this, but I didn't really put it together until he was fired. There were different news outlets that were reporting this. Then later that same week, he gets fired. Ethics watchdogs want U.S. attorney to investigate Trump's business interests. This is from March 8, 2017. With Congress showing no signs of taking action, a group of ethics watchdogs is turning to U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara to look into whether President Trump's many business interests violate the emoluments clause of the U.S. Constitution. Quote, published reports indicate that the Trump Organization and related Trump business entities have been receiving payments from foreign government sources which benefit Donald Trump through his ownership of the Trump Organization and related business entities, end quote, according to a letter sent to U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara. The letter went on to say, a failure by your office to investigate these reports and to take appropriate action will leave the nation exposed to foreign governments directly and indirectly providing payments and financial benefits to President Trump when those foreign governments may be seeking to influence executive branch policies and positions. This is precisely the kind of problem that the founding fathers acted to prevent by including the foreign emoluments clause in the Constitution, end quote. That's Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. Okay, so later that same week, Preet Bharara gets fired. And it wasn't until Bharara was fired that I then put together, wait a second, these articles from earlier in the week, talking about the watchdog groups, sending him a letter asking him to investigate violations of the emolument clause. We look at this article here, March 10th, 2017, thedailybeast.com, thedailybeast.com. Trump to U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, you're fired. Okay, now the first article I shared with you from NPR, National Public Radio, that was from March 8th, 2017. I think it was a Wednesday he was fired on or something like that. It was later in the same week after these articles came out about the letter from the watchdog groups. A few days later, that same week, he gets fired out of the clear blue. Trump to U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, you're fired. When the Trump administration ordered 46 United States attorneys, instead of 45, 46 United States attorneys to resign immediately, New York's Preet Bharara refused. So the White House fired him. This is from March 10th, 2017. Just hours after refusing to hand in his resignation, Preet Bharara, the crusading U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, announced on Twitter that he had been fired. Preet Bharara was asked to submit his resignation letter on Friday. Yeah, so that was a Friday. It was early in the week that the articles came out. Yeah, and that was on Friday, right? It was end of the week. It was a huge story, along with the 45 other U.S. attorneys held over from the Obama administration. Quote, I did not resign. Moments ago, I was fired. Being the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York will forever be the greatest honor of my professional life, he wrote. Bharara, whose office is in the end stages of an investigation of New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, about to begin the trials of two close allies of Governor Andrew Cuomo, and also appears to be investigating how Fox News structured settlements of sexual harassment and other claims brought by its employees, we're going to come back to that in just a second, met with Donald Trump shortly after the election and was told that he would stay. So that meeting was November 30th, 2016. Just this week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions assured him in a phone conversation that he would remain atop the Southern District of New York, according to the federal law enforcement official. Friday evening, the law enforcement official told the Daily Beast, Preet Bharara told his section chiefs that he'd yet to submit the requested letter and might instead challenge Attorney General Jeff Sessions to fire him. Evidently, the White House did not back down, okay? So he gets fired. Read this article, because I don't have time to get through all of it, right? But you read this article and other articles about this same subject, right? Now, what was Preet Bharara investigating when he was fired? Okay? I don't have access to classified information, but this is the information that I have. Here's what we do know he was investigating. As the Daily Beast article talked about, he was investigating sexual harassment payments that the Fox News network made to former female employees. We know that Roger Ailes, who was he was the founder and CEO of the Fox News network, he was good friends with Donald John Trump. They had to pay, Fox News had to pay out sexual harassment lawsuits against Roger Ailes, and this forced Roger Ailes to resign as CEO of Fox News. We also know it was the sexual harassment lawsuits that forced Bill O'Reilly to resign as well from Fox News as well. Okay, when the New York Times broke the story of Fox News and Bill O'Reilly having to pay about $13 million in lawsuits to settle 5 sexual harassment lawsuits from former female Fox News employees against Bill O'Reilly. This led to Bill O'Reilly being fired, as well as colorchange.org and other organizations putting pressure on 80 advertisers to withdraw advertising dollars from his show. That's what ultimately got him fired, but that was behind the revelation of the sexual harassment settlements, okay? The other thing that Preet Bharara was investigating is Deutsche Bank. Now, Deutsche Bank is the largest creditor that we know of Donald Trump. Deutsche Bank. Donald Trump owes Deutsche Bank $300 million. We found out late in 2017 that Jared Kushner owes Deutsche Bank $285 million. Deutsche Bank was fined $600 million by the federal government a few years ago because they were caught laundering $10 billion in money from Russia. Now, every time you look around, there's a Russian, either alive or dead. Every time you look around, there's a Russian, either alive or dead. And let me see what I have here. I know I have something on Deutsche Bank. Let me pull this up, just so I don't want people to think I'm making this stuff up, because you can't make this stuff up. You can't write a story better than this. I mean, if you wrote a story about this stuff, people will say, "Oh, you're lying. You're making this up. This could never happen. Nobody could be that stupid. Come on, get out of here." Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. Nobody would say, nobody's that stupid to say that in the open. Nobody is that stupid to tweet that on Twitter for the whole, are you kidding? For the whole world to see? Who'd be that dumb? Come on. This is what's happening. Okay? And I don't mean Raj rerun and Dwayne either. Deutsche Bank fined FINED and planned to help Russians launder $10 billion. New York Times. I don't want you to think I'm making this up. Proper documentation ends all conversation. I have the evidence. I have the receipts. January 30th, 2017. Deutsche Bank fined and planned to help Russians launder $10 billion. Deutsche Bank agreed on Monday to pay a $425 million fine to New York State's main financial regulator to settle charges that it helped Russian investors launder as much as $10 billion through its branches in Moscow, London, and New York. The punishment represents the latest regulatory black eye for Deutsche Bank, Germany's largest bank. In the last decade, it has been implicated in several financial scandals, including pushing toxic mortgages on investors and manipulating London's main lending rate for its own financial gain. Deutsche Bank also agreed to pay £163 million, or about $204 million in civil penalties in a separate settlement with the Financial Conduct Authority of Britain in the matter, the bank and the regulator said on Tuesday. In its investigation, the New York State Department of Financial Services found that between 2011 and 2015, a group of Deutsche Bank executives based mainly in Moscow and London helped wealthy Russians send money overseas by arranging stock trades that had no economic purpose other than disguising what the client was doing. Sounds like money laundering. Sounds like money laundering. Stephen K. Bannon, in the book from Michael Wolff, I think it was Playing with Fire or something like that, he said something to the effect of the path to Donald Trump and Jared Kushner is money laundering. What was known as the Russian mirror trading scheme, quote, occurred while the bank was on clear notice of serious and widespread compliance issues dating back a decade, end quote, said Maria T. Volo, the superintendent for financial services at the department. Quote, the offsetting trades here lacked economic purpose and could have been used to facilitate money laundering. Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. The offsetting trades here lacked economic purpose and could have been used to facilitate money laundering or enable other illicit conduct, end quote. Read this article here. I'm not making this stuff up. New York Times, the failing New York Times, Deutsche Bank fined and plan to help Russians launder $10 billion. Now, when you research Preet Bharara, at the time Preet Bharara was fired, what I know, based upon reporting, is one of the things he was investigating was not just Fox News, the Fox News network, paying out sexual harassment settlements, because see what Fox News was doing, the sexual harassment settlements that they were paying out, the way they were reporting this to investors was incorrect. If I remember correctly, they reported it like it's income to the former employees as opposed to actual, they were not reporting it as payments for a lawsuit, which is different because investors need to know about lawsuits like that impacts the stock price. The way they were reporting it was disguising it, okay? So he's investigating that, and he was also investigating Deutsche Bank and possible crimes they committed in the Southern District of New York when he was fired. Deutsche Bank is the largest creditor of Donald Trump. And Jared Kushner owes Deutsche Bank $285 million. So is it plausible? Is it plausible? This is speculation. Is it plausible that somebody at Deutsche picked up the phone or contacted Trump, sent a carrier pigeon, sent up smoke signals, and said, hey, you can work off some of this debt if you fire this guy who's investigating us? Is that far-fetched? I don't think so. Okay, so check out this article also. This stuff is deep. Okay, this stuff is deep and is real. We have the evidence of it. We have the breadcrumbs. We have the paper trail. Okay, all right. So let's see. This makes Watergate, man. This makes the people involved in Watergate look like Girl Scouts. What's taking place right now? And let me give you this one here from the Daily Beast also. I can't remember if I posted this one as well. Trump to U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, you're fired. Okay, give you this one. You can research this more. Don't take my word for this. Proper documentation ends all conversation. You don't have to believe a word that I say. Go do your own research. You research this yourself, and this will blow you away. Okay, so let's continue here. Nixon's obstruction of justice. Nixon's obstruction of justice, right? So Richard Nixon and his aides hatched a plan to instruct the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, to impede the FBI and the FBI's investigation of the crime of the Watergate break-in. This was a more serious crime than the break-in. It was an abuse of presidential power and a deliberate obstruction of justice. Okay, it was a conspiracy. Meanwhile, seven conspirators were indicted on charges related to the Watergate affair. At the urging of Richard Nixon's aides, 5 pleaded guilty to avoid trial. The other 2 were convicted in January of 1973. Now, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, they were writers for the for the Washington Post, and they basically broke the story, okay? And it was the Washington Post that led to the downfall of Richard Nixon, and it's going to be the Washington Post that leads to the downfall of Donald Trump. Washington Post / New York Times. So by that time, a growing handful of people, including Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, trial judge John Sirica, S-I-R-I-C-A, and members of a Senate investigating committee had begun to suspect that there was a larger scheme afoot. At the time, some of the conspirators began to crack under the pressure of the cover-up. A handful of Richard Nixon's aides, including the White House counsel John Dean, testified before a grand jury about the president's crimes. They also testified that Richard Nixon had secretly taped every conversation that took place in the Oval Office. Lordy, there are tapes. They also testified that Nixon had secretly taped every conversation that took place in the Oval Office. If prosecutors could get their hands on those tapes, they would have proof of the president's guilt. Richard Nixon struggled to protect the tapes during the summer and fall of 1973, the summer and fall of 1973. His lawyers argued that the president's executive privilege allowed him to keep the tapes to himself. But John Sirica, the Senate committee, and an independent special prosecutor named Archibald Cox were all determined to obtain those tapes. Hashtag Lordy, there are tapes. So then you have the Saturday Night Massacre. When Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox refused to stop demanding the tapes, President Richard Nixon ordered that he be fired. You're fired, leading several Justice Department officials to resign in protest. These events, which took place on Saturday, October 20th, 1973, are known as the Saturday Night Massacre. Eventually, Richard Nixon agreed to surrender some, but not all of the tapes. So you had the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General who resigned. So Nixon wanted them to fire the Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. They refused and they resigned, okay? Remember correctly, they resigned. So he got the Inspector General, who was Robert Bork. He got the Inspector General, who's third in line, Robert Bork, to fire the Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. But that did not stop the investigation. Okay? So eventually Nixon agreed to surrender some, but not all of the tapes. Early in 1974, the cover-up and efforts to impede the Watergate investigation began to unravel. On March 1st, a grand jury appointed by a new special prosecutor, March 1st, 1974, a grand jury appointed by a new special prosecutor indicted 7 of Nixon's former aides on various charges related to the Watergate affair. The jury, unsure if they could indict a sitting president, called Nixon and quote, unindicted co-conspirator, end quote, unindicted co-conspirator. That's where that term comes from. In July, the Supreme Court ordered Richard Nixon to turn over the tapes. Okay, it went to the Supreme Court. In July, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered Nixon to turn over the tapes. That was United States versus Nixon. While the president dragged his feet, the House of Representatives voted to impeach Richard Nixon for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, criminal cover-up, and several violations of the U.S. Constitution. Okay, Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution deals with high crimes and misdemeanors. All right, let's look at, and I think I had it bookmarked because I have thousands of articles bookmarked. How's everybody doing? Okay, we'll go to some of your comments, some more of your comments here in a minute. Sis Rayleigh said, how about all of the lost fund that were raised for the inauguration party? So there's about $107 million raised for the inauguration party, for Trump's inauguration party. Millions have gone unaccounted. It's just corruption all around. He talked about draining the swamp. This is the swamp thing. This is the swamp creature. I mean, this is like the swamp thing on steroids, right? Okay, so I just want to look at Saturday Night Massacre, because I've dealt with this before, and I just want to look at some history of the Saturday Night Massacre, right? Because see, when I see the firing of assistant of acting Attorney General Sally Yates and FBI Director James Comey and Preet Bharara and things like this, but then also the constant attacks on Andrew McCabe, who became the acting FBI director, okay? And I see the attacks on him, things like this by Trump. I mean, Trump, he's just incriminating himself. He's not acting like somebody who's innocent at all, okay? So let's look at this from history.com. What was the Saturday Night Massacre? Let's just look a little deeper at this. And let me pull up this article. Okay. Yeah, so that was October 20th, 1973. Okay. We have an article here from history.com, official website of the History Channel. What was the Saturday Night Massacre by Evan Andrews, right? And let's see here. Turn this off. Okay. So one of the most controversial episodes of the Watergate scandal, the so-called Saturday Night Massacre, came on October 20th, 1973, when embattled President Richard Nixon fired Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, COX, and accepted the resignations of Attorney General Elliot Richardson and Deputy Attorney General William Rukelshus, Rukelshus, all right? So just a second, let me bookmark this. Okay. So the massacre stemmed from an inquiry into the notorious June 17, 1972 break-in at the Watergate complex, in which 5 Nixon operatives were caught trying to bug the Democratic National Committee headquarters. Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, a Harvard Law professor and former U.S. Solicitor General, was tapped to investigate the incident in May of 1973. He soon clashed with the White House over Nixon's refusal to release over 10 hours of secret Oval Office recordings, some of which implicated the president in the Watergate break-in. On October 20 of 1973, okay, this is a Saturday night, in an unprecedented show of executive power, Richard Nixon ordered Attorney General Elliot Richardson and Deputy Attorney General William Rukelshus to fire Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. Both men refused and resigned their posts in protest. The role of Attorney General then fell to Solicitor General, not Inspector General, Solicitor General Robert Bork, who reluctantly complied with President Richard Nixon's request and dismissed Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. Less than a half hour later, the White House dispatched FBI agents to close off the offices of the Special Prosecutor, Attorney General, and Deputy Attorney General. Richard Nixon's attack on his own Justice Department came with grave consequences. Listen to this. Assistant Watergate Prosecutor Nick Ackerman on MSNBC last week, and in the article that we started out talking about from thehill.com, said history is repeating itself with the Mueller probe, okay? And Nick Ackerman was there. He's still an attorney. Former Watergate prosecutor Nick Ackerman said Friday, August 3rd, that special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation is, quote, history repeating itself, and suggested that some administration members questioning Mueller's probe could be charged with perjury. Okay? When you look at this, Nixon's attack on his own Justice Department came with grave consequences. Trump is doing the same thing. He's attacking his own Justice Department. He's attacking his own Intelligence Committee. But this is much worse with Trump. More than 50,000 concerned citizens sent telegrams to Washington, and 23 members of Congress introduced resolutions calling for Richard Nixon's impeachment. In the face of overwhelming protests, Richard Nixon relented and appointed Leon Jaworski as the new Watergate prosecutor. Okay, this is after he had Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox fired October 20th, 1973. Jaworski resumed the investigation and eventually secured the release of the Oval Office recordings in July of 1974, when the Supreme Court ruled the tapes did not fall under executive privilege. Faced with the so-called quote-unquote smoking gun of his involvement in Watergate, Richard Nixon resigned the presidency August 8, 1974. That's when he had the television address announcing his resignation, and he officially resigned the next day, 12 noon, August 9, 1974. This is the 44th anniversary of that taking place, August 8, 1974, okay? So check this out, history.com. What was the Saturday Night Massacre? What was the Saturday Night Massacre? Okay, and to understand what is, you must understand what was. Okay, and so you have to understand history, because history has a way of repeating itself. It may not be exactly the way it was before. Okay, but to understand why things are the way they are today, to understand how not to make the same mistake, you have to understand what took place in the past. This is why history is so important. And the people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. Okay, the people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. Okay, now Toya said they should make a movie about this. Yeah, but see, if they make a movie, it's gonna have to be like a three-night movie, like they did the New Edition story. Or it may have to be five. They may have to do a mini series like Roots. Roots was originally when it aired in 1977. I think it was either 5 parts. I think it was 5 parts, or 6 parts, something like that. Something like 12, 13, 14 hours. They can't do a 2-hour movie on this or a 3-hour movie. No, they're gonna have to do a mini series on all this stuff. Okay, they have to do a mini series. All right. And Alec Baldwin should play Donald Trump. Wouldn't that be poetic justice? Alec Baldwin should play Donald Trump. All right. Okay, let's continue here. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here in just a second. And then let me look at this other article here. Saturday Night Massacre. So it's important to understand this chronology of history. Okay, to understand it, as Professor Kaba Kamene talks about, formerly Booker T. Coleman is one of my teachers. To understand the existence of something, you first must understand the pre-existence of existence. Okay, and also people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past and the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. All right, so this talks about Watergate Special Prosecutor dismissed. Okay, this was this day in history, October 20th, 1973. Okay. And if you go to history.com, you can sign up for their this day in history emails. They send them out each morning, deal with what happened on this day in history. I get those each morning from history.com. All right. Okay, so Saturday Night Massacre. Okay, so we have Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox refused to stop demanding the tapes. He's going to be fired. Early 1974, the cover-up and efforts to impede the Watergate investigation began to unravel. On March 1st, a grand jury appointed by a new special prosecutor that was Jaworski, indicted 7 of Nixon's former aides on various charges related to the Watergate affair. The jury, unsure if they could indict a sitting president, called Nixon an, quote, unindicted co-conspirator, end quote. So in July of 1974, the Supreme Court ordered Nixon to turn over the tapes. While the president dragged his feet, the House of Representatives voted to impeach Nixon for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, criminal cover-up, and several violations of the Constitution, okay? And it was the House Judiciary Committee where the hearings take place, and then the full body of the House of Representatives then votes, okay, also. So the House Judiciary Committee votes to impeach, then it goes to the full body. If we look at, I was watching, before I started this broadcast, I was watching the video from July 1974, Representative Barbara Jordan from Texas, who was on the House Judiciary Committee. I was watching her impeachment speech, okay? And that's on YouTube, B. Jordan impeachment speech. We'll post that link right here. And also, I think blacktimetravel.com has an article dealing with Barbara Jordan as well. Blacktimetravel.com also has an article dealing with that. But check out that, check out her speech. It's about 13 minutes or so, because she had a time limit of 15 minutes. Okay, so that's a bad sister, you know, who, and Maxine Waters reminds me of her, actually. Maxine Waters reminds me of Barbara Jordan. And I'm going to see if we can pull up this article here from Black Time Travel as well. Blacktimetravel.com. They have some good articles. They're dealing with history. Yeah, here we go. Okay, we'll pull this up. All right. This woman led the charge to get rid of President Richard Nixon. Okay, this is an article from April 27, 2015. This woman led the charge to get rid of Richard Nixon. Barbara Jordan was a political insider for many years. Here she is in a video giving the reasons that the U.S. Congress should push for President Richard Nixon, push for his impeachment, push to remove him from office. Okay, so check that out also. And we'll post this link here as well. That's from blacktimetravel.com. Okay, I just want to bookmark this. All right. We'll post this link here as well. Okay, how's everybody doing? How y'all like this type of information? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. How y'all like this type of information? Also, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, you want to promote your African-American owned business, you want to advertise with the African History Network, reach thousands of potential customers, you can advertise on the audio podcast of our radio show that we do, and some of the Facebook Live broadcasts we do when we turn them into audio podcasts. We add commercials in also. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, okay? We have a special promotion, buy 1 month, get 1 month free. We have, I think, about 2 more slots left. So, because we've been bringing on some new advertisers. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com for more information. Okay, let's continue here. All right, so Nixon resigns, all right? So after the Saturday Night Massacre, it's October 23rd, 1973, right? Then you have a new prosecutor, Jaworski, appointed on March 1st, 1974. Finally and then the case goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. Nixon turns over Nixon tapes, okay, July 74. Okay, finally on August 5th, 1974, Richard Nixon releases, it goes to the Supreme Court in August 5th, 1974, he releases the tapes. because this was a few days before he resigned. Finally, on August 5th, 1974, Nixon released the tapes, which provided undeniable evidence of his complicity in the Watergate crimes. Lordy, there are tapes. In the face of almost certain impeachment by Congress, Richard Nixon resigned in disgrace on August 8th, 1974, and left office the following day, August 9th, 1974. 6 weeks later, after Vice President Gerald Ford was sworn in as president, he pardoned Richard Nixon for any crimes he had committed while in office. Some of Nixon's aides were not so lucky. They were convicted of very serious offenses and sent to federal prison. Nixon himself never admitted to any criminal wrongdoing, though he did acknowledge using poor judgment. You think? 48 people around Richard Nixon went to prison. So people around Donald Trump should be scared to death. 48 people around Nixon went to prison. He didn't do a day in jail. His abuse of presidential power had a long-lasting effect on American political life, creating an atmosphere of cynicism and distrust. While many Americans have been deeply dismayed by the outcome of the Vietnam War and saddened by the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy later in '68, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. April 4th, 1968, and other leaders, Watergate added further disappointment to a national climate already soured by the difficulties and losses of the previous decade. Okay, so check out this article from history.com, Watergate scandal from history.com. All right, so if you understand history, you can predict what's going to happen. If you understand history and you see patterns and things like this, you can predict what's going to happen. As I said before, Donald Trump is going to be forced to resign from office because there's a whole lot more evidence against Trump, okay, than there was against Nixon. Trump is going to be forced to resign from office. This is why midterm elections are so important. Hashtag flip this house, because there's a blue wave coming. And when Democrats take back control of the House of Representatives, they need to win 23 seats to take back control of the House of Representatives, and there's a good chance they'll take back control of the U.S. Senate. When they take back control of the House of Representatives, and Mueller completes his investigation, or at least a good portion of his investigation, comes out with more indictments, right? You're going to see articles of impeachment drawn up in the House of Representatives. You're going to see the House Judiciary Committee debating it, because then Democrats will be in control of the House Judiciary Committee. They can control what's happened. They can order the hearings to take place, okay? And Trump does not want to be put on trial, okay? Is not being found guilty by the U.S. Senate, and you need 67 votes in the U.S. Senate because there are 100 senators. So for a president to be found guilty of impeachment, removed from office, what have you, you need 67 votes out of 100. Okay, he doesn't want to go that. He doesn't want to go that far because he doesn't want to have to. He doesn't want to have to testify under oath, and those are going to be public hearings. Those are not going to be behind closed doors. He does not want to testify under oath. Okay. So he's going to be forced to resign from office, just like Richard Nixon. All right. Okay. Let's look at some of your comments, then we'll get out of here. Patricia said they've been making moves about this. You just have to know politics. But this is why midterm elections are so important. Not to mention blocking a lot of nonsense that Trump is trying to get passed through the House of Representatives. We know right now with the next year's budget, we know that Republicans are trying to cut $2 trillion to balance, to pay for the $1.4 trillion tax cut they gave to the top 1%, because 83% of the benefits go to the top 1%. To pay for that, Republicans are trying to cut $2 trillion from Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and the Affordable Health Care Act. Now, who is that going to hurt? That's going to hurt a lot of African Americans and poor whites. They're trying to cut $2 trillion. Okay. There was the Hill.com had an article about this, I think last week. I think I talked about that Sunday on my radio show, the African History Network show. The Hill.com had an article about this. Tax breaks for wealthy paid for with deep cuts. Tax breaks for wealthy paid for with deep cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Okay. and also the Affordable Health Care Act. Read this article here. We'll post a link. Proper documentation ends all conversation. You can go research this yourself. Okay, I do extensive research. I don't just deal with history. I deal with politics, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, current events, issues pertaining to the African American community. Politics, we have to understand what politics is. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. The legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. This is what politics is, okay? So how do you all like this type of information? Okay, who we have here? We have, how you all like this type of information? We have Angela Makiba. She said, this is great information. You filled in the missing information I didn't know. Willie Clarence, information must be informative. Love it. All right, Robbie Smith, your information is very rich. All right. Okay, and if you like this type of information, hey, if you want to support the African History Network, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. If you want to donate 10, 15, 25, 50, $100, whatever it is. Appreciate that. If you want to set up for a recurring donation, definitely appreciate that also. All of my DVD lectures, I have about 40 of my lectures now on DVD, available at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a 6 DVD Black Panther bundle pack where you get 6 of my DVD lectures, including 3 dealing with the film Black Panther. It's on sale now, $45, regularly $75. And that's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. And yeah, that's right. We'll post a link here for that. And then also we have the online courses that I teach. They're all on demand. We have a bundle pack. You get 10 in the bundle pack. It includes how Richard Nixon's war on drugs was a war on the African-American community. It also includes understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, where I deal with thousands of years of history. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. We deal with ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. We deal with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago. Also, that bundle pack includes great African women in history, the mothers of civilization. It includes African-American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. It also includes a online class I did dealing with the film Black Panther as well. So that's on sale, $60, regularly $130. We just posted a link here, and it's also available at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com right on the homepage. They're all on demand. Watch at your own pace. Watch from around the world on your phone, tablet, or computer. Okay, let's see here. Somebody said, we need you. Let's see. Angela said, I think with the present things going on, African Americans are going to be forced to work together and stop all the foolishness. Well, we were already working together. I mean, we were working together. President Barack Obama, you had us coming out in protest against the killing of Freddie Gray. You had us coming out in protest against the killing of Philando Castile. You had us coming out, even if you go back, the protests with Colin Kaepernick didn't start under Trump. It started under President Barack Obama. That was Colin Kaepernick's protest was discovered. Steve Weiss basically wrote the first article for it for NFL.com. It was the 3rd preseason game. It was in August of 2016. The 3rd preseason game was it August 25th, August 26th. The 3rd preseason game, San Francisco 49ers played against the Green Bay Packers, and that's when his protest was uncovered. He was seen sitting on the bench during the national anthem. Okay, and that was before the 2016 November 8th, 2016 election. So there are numerous examples of African Americans working together under President Barack Obama. Those who are already working together understand this. Okay. Under Trump, many of our people still don't know what's going on. I travel. I do presentations. I'll be in San Diego this weekend. And still, many of our people don't understand what happened in the 2016 election cycle, don't understand the rapid voter suppression that took place. You had 16.4 million African Americans registered to vote. Only 59% voted. This rapid voter suppression, that was 7 percentage point drop from 2012 election. Many of us still don't understand what happened. Okay. All right. So we as African Americans should educate our own children. Okay. We need you to reform public schools. Okay, you can put all that on me, Toya. Need me to reform public schools. And if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at info, I-N-F-O, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at info, I-N-F-O, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. All right, so look, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you control the compass of his actions, because the mind can't teach what it doesn't know. Okay. Right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. And those in San Diego, I'll see you this weekend in San Diego at Return to God's. Peace.